Welcome to Two Roads Crossing, a podcast production of the Christian Veterinary Mission. Do you wonder how your faith fits together with your profession? Well, join us as we explore how to live well at the intersection of two roads crossing.
Well, hello and welcome to Two Roads Crossing, a podcast production of the Christian Veterinary Mission, where we explore the intersection of faith and vocation. My name is Barry Schwank. I'm a veterinarian, a pastor, and your host for another exciting episode with Dr. Rob Goodman. Dr. Rob has joined the CVM team to help with an initiative on well-being. And I think, Rob, it's great to have you back. I appreciate you taking time to talk to me. I have a confession to make. Last time that we talked, I had a great time talking with you, getting a little bit of insight into what kind of led you to this point and kind of created that vision and calling for wellness within this profession. And as we left off last time, I had asked about how this initiative was going to be kind of carried out, and you told me that there were two models, but before you could get to model number 2, I signed off. And so probably left a lot of people wondering, I thought there were two models. He only talked about one. So as we get started today, can you maybe just share a little bit about the two models that we're looking at with this initiative? And then you had also mentioned, I think, there were some domains that are kind of covered or engaged within that sphere of wellness. Maybe explain the two models and explain a little bit about those domains, and then maybe we can move forward talking about one specifically today.
All right, so thank you. And I realized that, I'd said two and only described one as we signed off last time, and I'm like, man, that would drive my wife crazy. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to return sanity to my household.
I'm so sorry.
The two models that I like to look at in terms of well-being, kind of models of who we are as people. Sometimes it's easier to break things into small parts to understand them, recognizing they come back together in a whole. The first one, if we think about concentric circles, we have, and so if we think about the skin around us, we have the outside world and then the self, and that engagement of where our circumstances encounter ourselves, kind of the where we are piece of things, and we engage with our sight, our smell, our taste, our touch, and the senses kind of come in as we engage with our circumstances, and then those engagements kind of move in, and as we think about those, they trigger our emotions, they touch on our values, they touch in how we are, and that's kind of the way that we make sense of what's going on and how we decide to engage in action. And then at the very center is the who we are, the very core of our identity. And as Christians, our identity is always as a beloved child of God. John the Evangelist makes the bold statement that in Christ we are privileged to be called beloved children of God, and that is what we are. A very much an ontological statement of the stuff of our being is beloved, and our identity is in Christ. As we look at that model, there are times that in the fullness of our faith we live outward from that identity of beloved into our outside world. Often, though, what happens is we take the inputs of the outside world, the things we hear, the things we see, the things we taste, the things we touch, the ways that we feel, the way that those things make us feel, and we allow those to be our perception of identity. And so the fullness of well-being is to understand those dynamics of, wow, am I living from the outside in? Am I allowing the circumstances of the world to tell me who I am? Or am I living from the inside out? Am I allowing God to say, you are my beloved, and living life as the beloved? And so when we are truly well, we are living that inside out, knowing, we have the practices that ground us in our identity. We recognize the ways that we are drawn in our values, beliefs, and emotions to either live from our identity or take our identity from our circumstances, and that changes the way we live, which leads us to that second model of, wow, where do those interactions occur? And if we think in this way, a big circle with small little spheres in there that come and bounce around each other. Always hate to put a model on paper because it makes it still and static, and you can't put all the dimensions in there. It's probably, on our well-being logo has a circle and it has well-being and these neatly, stacked balls of different colors that have the 5 domains of physical, emotional, spiritual, vocational, and relational well-being, nicely circumscribed and slightly overlapping. I think if we truly wanted the real life model of that, the little super balls that we had as kids that had all of the colors in spirals and different shapes, and they just bounced all over the place unpredictably. That's probably a little bit more of the realistic way that we live our lives.
I kind of, as you were describing it, I was thinking about peas and mashed potatoes. I don't know why. Like for a long time, there was that whole, you've got to keep them separate and trying to fight those things from colliding into each other. And then eventually you realize as you get older, you can just, it's all going to the same place. You can mix it all together and it goes down smooth. So no, I love, so in that first model, it's one of the things that we often struggle with, like the idea of joy versus happiness. Like, if our joy is rooted in the promises and the fulfillment of God's promises, and who we are beyond our circumstances, then there's that inward outward. So it's not happiness dictating, coming from our circumstances, but rather the joy of the Lord pouring out from us despite our circumstances. And peace is kind of the same way, and hope is kind of the same way. And so that's a great way of thinking about it. And you're right. When we try to break things apart, the reality is all those things fit together and are intertwined and they're messy. It's not just 2 roads crossing. It's this weird Texas interchange, all those roads at the same time. And you're like, I'm never getting out of this state if I'm not careful. So it'll be fun, I think, for us to maybe break some of those apart, realizing that, as we talk about these different domains, as we break them apart, we realize that they will overlap a little bit. But for the sake of discussion, it might be good for us just to pick one of those domains and just talk about it a little bit. And then, for each of these sessions that you and I are going to sit down, I think that if we can focus on one, discuss it a little bit more, we may just gain a little bit more insight in a particular area, and then we can worry about those gray areas where our peas and our mashed potatoes mix. Yes.
I kind of like to start thinking about the physical domain, simply because one, it's the place that we're most experienced with. It's the place that probably have a tremendous amount of knowledge, but it's also a place where we can really talk about the practices and the challenges of living as we want to. We're recording this in December. It'll be published later, but it's right around that New Year's time where we look at the mirror, we look at the scale, and if you're like me, you say, "Oh wow, that's 7 kilos that I need to lose." I like to use kilos when I talk about weight loss because the number's smaller.
That's right. It's so
and
much
the numbers really aren't real. No one knows what a kilo is.
No one knows. No one knows.
But truly, that's one of those things. We know what to do.
Right.
It's wow, how do I choose to do that? And so, as we look at that physical domain, the domain of physical health, there are some things that we don't have choices over. I'm not going to be 20 years younger regardless of what I do. I'm not going to be 6 inches taller regardless of what I do. I did tell a physician one time, I'm not overweight, I'm under tall. But I can't change how tall I am, unfortunately. I can't change that, my knees or my hips or my heart or whatever doesn't allow me to run like I used to.
Mm,
And I have to do physical activity by walking.
mm,
Um, but we do have a number of choices that have a great deal of impact on our physical well-being. And they're really simple things. They're the things we do every day. Um, what we eat, our nutrition, what we do, our physical activity, and how much we sleep. So activity, nutrition, and sleep are kind of the cornerstones of the building blocks, the foundation of our physical health. If we can optimize those, we can optimize most of the rest of our physical well-being. And again, we kind of know what to do. Um, and it's wow, how do we arrange our lives to be able to do those things?
mm,
How do I arrange my life to be able to get 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night? How do I arrange my life to be able to incorporate aerobic exercise, strength, strength training and stretching and mobility? How do I arrange my life to be able to eat nutritious meals at the right time in the right order? And so that's really, as we look at the physical well-being side, it's centered on, wow, how do I become aware of what I am doing? How do I choose what I want to be doing? And how do I arrange my life to be able to do that?
mm.
Which again sets us back to all of well-being is about becoming aware,
Right.
choosing, and making sure that what we choose meets the goal that we have.
Well, and it's interesting. I mean, going back to that first model that you talked about, when I think about my own personal physical well-being, how much of that is influenced outside in, not inside out. Like it's my
Mhm.
when I think about the amount of sleep that I get, it is definitely influenced by the busyness of the schedule. And more often than not, if I have to be honest and confess here, I'm usually the one that sets the schedule. So I'm not sure,
Yeah.
what. So it's outside in, trying to do all the things that I think that I'm supposed to be doing. When do I not eat appropriately? I'm getting ready after we're done with this podcast. I'm going to hop on a school bus to go to a soccer game. I won't get home until 8 or 9 o'clock at night. And I can guarantee you that there's going to be a temptation not to take the brown rice and chicken that my wife has put in the fridge and just eat with the kids at McDonald's because it's so much easier than carrying around my stuff. And so completely, exactly what you have to do. But that outside in kind of approach where your circumstances dictate things. How do you, um, when you talk about, first of all, being aware, so okay, I'm aware that I'm doing the things, but oftentimes I will claim ignorance. I won't pay attention, so that way I don't have to be motivated to do anything. What takes you to that next step of going from awareness into action, maybe?
So I think that even before we become aware of what we're doing, we have to become aware of what our end goal is,
Mm,
and what that looks like. What is our desire? It's one thing to say, wow, there's a number on the scale, and I'd like for it to be less than it is.
mm,
But we have to take that to a why. Um, and wow, I want to, I have a 1-year-old grandson,
mm.
and you know I want to be able to get down on the floor and up off of the floor, without creaking and grunting and groaning, to be able to play with him. And so
Mm,
even beyond weight, in order to do that, you know it, in my 40s I could do that easily. Now in my 50s, man,
mm,
there's some stuff that I have to do to be able to do that. And
mm,
and so having that why of not just, wow, I should lose some weight to be healthy. I should be flexible to be healthy. I should sleep more to be healthy. It's, wow, I want to be well so that I can.
Mm.
And we see that in human healthcare, in goal-directed medicine. Yeah, the Cleveland Clinic kind of pioneered some of that, looking at, in patients with chronic illness, what do you want to be able to do? And in that rehabilitation side, and a guy says, wow, I want to be able to go to my daughter's wedding in June. And that's a concrete goal, both for him to work towards, to motivate him into rehab, and for the person who's the physical therapist in that team to be able to say, wow, if you're going to go to this wedding in June, you have to be able to do this, this, and this. Here are the ways that we tailor your therapy to be able to do that. And we tie, wow, you're going to do 20 reps of this boring exercise so that you can go up the 3 steps into the plane to be able to fly to Hawaii, to, those kinds of things. And so getting really granular on that why is important as we start looking at, wow, how are we going to make these choices between McDonald's and brown rice and chicken, between, overscheduling and undersleeping. How are we going to make those choices? We have to be able to do that. And then we have to be aware of the choices that we're already making. And that's kind of the next step. And, one of the most powerful ways, particularly around food, is to do a food journal. And to write down, this is what I ate at what time every day for a week. When I did this several years ago, I was still working, and I was in this really dark, windowless cubicle in the basement of a building. And I recognized that at 2 o'clock every afternoon, I walked up 3 flights of stairs. So I'm getting exercise. I can count that as a good.
Good, you're good.
To buy, there was a little snack bar that one of the offices had done as a kind of a unit fundraiser. So I'm helping out people too. I can make excuses with the best of them.
We can justify everything.
And bought the chocolate fudge brownie grandma's cookies.
Mm-hmm.
And I recognized, as I looked at that, I'm like, am I hungry? No, not really. Why am I doing this? I was lonely in my cubicle. I needed to move because I'd been sitting, and I hadn't seen the sun all day. Okay, I can do that and go up 1 flight of stairs and walk on the sidewalk around the building. And it's truly even more satisfying than, those cookies are good, but sunshine's even better. And so really kind of looking at, what am I doing? What do I want to be doing? James Clear in Atomic Habits, great book to look at why we do what we do and how to change that. And he talks about the source of our habits are that there's a cue that stimulates our desire, that desire, we respond to that in some way, and then we get a reward. If we keep doing it, it's rewarded in some way.
Right.
And sometimes those rewards are useful, sometimes they're not. For me, the cue is, wow, it's 2 o'clock. I'm lonely. I'm tired of sitting in this dark little cramped space. I want to see some people. I'm going to go get cookies. And so that was the cue, the desire. The response was, I'm going to go get cookies. Satisfying? Yeah, for a moment.
Right.
But not truly satisfying of the core of that desire. And so to really look at, how do we, as we look at these habits, and I mean, we are creatures of habit. Right. We, particularly around activity, nutrition, and sleep. If our habit is to come home and sit down in the chair and watch TV, that's a habit. If our habit is to come home and go to the gym and work out, that's a habit. They're different habits with different rewards to them. But to really look at, if we look at how do we change that habit,
Mm.
starting with what is that desire? What's the desire behind the desire?
Mm.
And what's my ultimate goal? What's the desire in there at this time of habit? What am I seeking? From that, going to, wow, and what am I doing? What is good? What am I grateful for? And beginning with that gratitude. Otherwise, we start down that path of, wow, and you used should and ought as you were talking about what yours. Once we start doing that, we end up in that self-justification side of things. Well, I really could be, I am walking up 2 flights of stairs and I am helping these people earn money. We can get into that side of things. But if we say, wow, what am I doing that's good? And we start there, then we can start saying, okay, what am I resistant to? Where's my resistance? And sometimes that's, wow, it's just easier to do something else. James Clear also says that when we start looking at a positive habit, if we want to change and do something, that the way to do that is to make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying with this new habit. And so, if for example, one of the habits that I gotten out of that I want to get back into is doing the daily office in the morning, doing morning prayer. And to do that, I put my prayer book where I sit down. It's easy, it's obvious, and it reminds me of my intention. And so sometimes it's things like that. But to look at our desire, to look at gratitude, to look at what our resistance is, and then to look at what grace we need. What is it that I need from God? What is the gift that I need in order for this to be successful? And to ask for that grace. From that, oftentimes we also recognize, well, what in the community, what support do I need from people to be able to do this? If I want to eat healthier in some way, and I don't tell my wife and my kids,
Right.
hey, I want to eat healthier, and they say, hey, let's go to McDonald's. Relationally, I'm gonna say, sure, let's go to McDonald's. And so if there's a way of, if there's a communal aspect to be able to communicate that as well as we look at habits. If I say, wow, I want to get 8 hours of sleep, usually we have more influence on when we go to bed than when we get up. Right. If we have to be at work at 8 o'clock, I have to get up at whatever to be able to get there, to drive there, all of that. I can't say, wow, if I need an extra hour of sleep, I'm just going to sleep for an extra hour and I'll just be late for work. That doesn't, I mean, we do have much more free time when we do that because we're going to get fired.
That's right.
But,
exactly.
Yeah, we do have influence on when we go to bed. But if we're living in a family, we do have to say, wow, if I'm going to go to bed at 10 o'clock to be able to do that, I have to communicate with everybody, hey, I want to be in bed by 10. Right. So that, and I have adult children as well. And so they come home and they start talking at 10 o'clock.
Yes.
I'm like, guys, I got to go to bed. Yeah. And that brings us to some of the context piece as we look at this. As we start looking at well-being as a whole, we can sit there, and if our lives were all alone, I could order it just perfectly to, I could sleep 8 hours a day. I could pray 7 hours a day. All of this. If I have young kids, 8 hours of interrupted sleep with an infant it's just not going to happen. No. We're doing some caregiving with my mom, and when you're on call for things, you're scheduling your own. And so being able to say, wow, what is my context right now? What is actually realistic? As I start setting these goals, because if we say, wow, I'm going to do this, and we have this other demand that isn't going to go away, we have to say, wow, is my goal or this demand more important?
Right.
And most of the time we're gonna say, well, this demand is more important.
Mhm.
Start that beforehand. Wow, what are my demands? What am I actually capable of? Let's set a realistic rhythm of life as we do this.
Yeah, because that's when those demands come up, unfortunately, it's kind of like planning a budget. You have to, you have certain number of hours in the day, you have certain number of dollars in the bank. And if you set out in advance and this is how I'm going to be able to appropriately manage and balance all of these things, you're not necessarily swayed by your circumstances. You've taken kind of control of the narrative, and have allowed yourself to to do the things that are necessary to accomplish the things that are necessary for that particular time. And I love that idea of, you know, when we talk about even like losing weight as an example, if you say, I want to lose 7 kilos, it's almost existential. Like there's no real grasp of what that means. There's no real reward other than I can tell you this, my scale is adjustable. So I could do that today. I could just go in there right now, but it doesn't necessarily do what I want because ultimately, like you said, you want to be able to get down to the floor with the grandkids. You want to be able to go on this hike. You want to be able to go on that vacation. You want to be able to do this or to do that. And if we have that in mind and we set these smaller goals and we start documenting what we need to accomplish each day, we can get closer. And the more that we make those things, easier to do, I love the idea of placing your prayer book right where you're going to sit because it's there, right? It's, you don't have to go necessarily out of the way in order to make it happen. It's right there and very accessible, and so then it's easier to accomplish too. Um, do you find that from a physical standpoint, is it once you get past the awareness and the recognition, and you start to move towards action and creating these new habits, is there still a need then to constantly be reevaluating as you move forward?
You know, our circumstances, our context changes so often. And we do have to reevaluate. Yeah, I very intentionally use the term rhythm of life rather than rule of life.
Right.
I love the monastic tradition of a rule of life, but
Mm.
for me, a rule is something to either be followed or broken, and once it's broken, let's break it good. Um,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
and so for me to say this is the rhythm of life, this is how I move along to the rhythm of what's going on in my life, what's going on in my community, what's going on in the demands that are external to me. How do I move with this?
Mm.
And those things change so often.
Mm.
They they change when kids are in school and when they're out of school. They change. You coach sports.
Mm.
Your rhythm is different
Yeah.
in season than off season.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and so to be able to notice, wow, I'm a little out of rhythm.
Mm.
And to sit down and around that thing that you're recognizing I'm out of rhythm, what one thing can I do to come back to that?
Mm.
Um, Perhaps even putting that, I don't journal often,
Mm.
but I recognize that when I am out of rhythm in some way, it is good for me to journal in order to recognize that. Several weeks ago, I started noticing, wow, I'm angry and short-tempered so much more.
Yeah.
What is going on? I noticed, not necessarily physically, but emotionally, that
Yeah.
I was somehow something wasn't right.
Mm.
And it took being able to journal and say, wow, I'm overcommitted on some things.
Yeah.
I'm taking too much ownership. Oh, I've been neglecting Sabbath.
Hmm.
I've been neglecting the tool that God gives us to say, wow, trust me in this. Um, and so it was that taking time to notice and to journal or to reflect on what is not feeling right now. Because we're changing, our demands are changing,
Right.
our community changes all the time. So being able to come back to that and say, wow, what is my desire here?
Mm.
What am I truly grateful for? Where am I encountering resistance, and where do I need grace? And that's become a pattern of my journaling recently, is to simply say desire,
Right.
gratitude, resistance, grace,
Mm.
and allow that to form my habits, not just in the physical domain, but in all the domains of well-being.
Well, I appreciate you having this conversation with us about physical wellness. Like you said, there's a lot of things that we probably already know, but in this conversation, there are a lot of things that got my wheels spinning to maybe some new approaches, maybe a new mindset, and how to tackle some of the things that I've been struggling with. If you are listening to this and you have some specific questions about physical wellness or about wellness in general, if you have any questions, concerns, if you are struggling in any way, would like to have someone to talk to, or like to be able to connect to some of CVM's wellness initiatives, you can get a hold of Dr. Rob Goodman at wellness@cvm.org. That's the is
Well-being.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh my goodness. Well-being. I guess we're gonna have to talk about mental wellness here soon. So it's well-being, WELLBEING at cvm.org. Rob, I appreciate you taking the time again. Look forward to our next conversation as we talk more about wellness. And in that conversation, hopefully there will be plenty of folks listening and learning how to live well at the intersection of two roads crossing.
Thank you for listening to Two Roads Crossing, a podcast production of the Christian Veterinary Mission. If you are blessed by this content, like and subscribe so that you are alerted when new content is released. If you would like more information about CVM, or if you have questions, comments, or topical suggestions, you can find us online at www.cvm.org. Or you can contact us by emailing podcast@cvm.org. God has a plan for the nations, and that plan includes you. We pray that CVM has encouraged you to live out your calling with confidence and competence. So, until next time, may the voice of the shepherd ring loud and clear as you follow him in faith to the intersection of two roads crossing.